Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Wonderful to have back the firebrand himself, District 1 Republican, the great state of Florida. It's Matt Gaetz. Matt, how are you?
I'm good, Joe. Thanks for having me on. We got a newsy day and a lot to discuss.
Man, there's so much going on, Matt. I got to tell you something. As I watch the inner workings and the mechanisms of our government, I get a little bit more depressed as I watch it, other than the fact that it's an election year, and I think that we're going to get a really positive result in November. And maybe we have time to get to that in a moment. But obviously the big story that broke Friday, which is always a bad day for a good story to break because people are busy doing their weekend stuff, but it's got legs, which is good, is the fact that John Durham finally is saying something about something, and this thing appears to have teeth. You're a lawyer. You're a guy who's in the fray every day. You're fighting for our rights, our freedoms, our liberties, and you're fighting against corruption in government. Matt, what should I glean from this report? Because depending on which side you listen to, I'm getting different stories.
Well, they're always accusing us of the stuff they're doing.
Right.
So Durham has spoken through indictments and pleadings that lay out a scheme whereby folks associated with the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign were seeding lies with Russians and then trying to get those lies retold enough into the bloodstream of the Department of Justice. And then, of course, at the Hillary Clinton campaign, you had extensive spying. Now you have the allegations made in the Durham indictments that both before and critically after the election of Donald Trump as president, you had an effort underway to try to persuade the vendors providing IT services to essentially hack and listen in on and expose and will into existence the Russia hoax. I remember when Democrats said that I was Vladimir Putin's lawyer, that Donald Trump was a Russian agent, and yet it seems that the criminal activity that was really happening was the criminal activity appending to the DNC and the Clinton campaign.
Well, it's Matt Gaetz, Firebrand. Go and get his book called Firebrand. Check out the video podcast. It's amazing. You've had Marjorie Taylor Greene on a lot lately, too. It's just amazing discussions. I watched them all. What boggles my mind, Matt, is this. We know that the Clinton campaign paid for the fake dossier. We know that. That is above reproach. We know that Comey and the FBI lied to the FISA court to get the warrants and to extend the warrants. In fact, it was a circular news cycle where they would put a news story out that they generated. Then they'd say, hey, look, Yahoo News said that's the reason why we should continue it. And again, it was just them planting their own stories. All of that is above reproach, what I just said. That's common knowledge, yet nobody really has suffered, save for one FBI guy that lied on a piece of paper or something. So now we get to Hillary Clinton again, directly implicated in not only trying to prove a connection between Trump and Russia, but when they found none, they tried to create one. Well, I want to show you something, because I know that you haven't seen this yet today. This is Hillary Clinton's Twitter feed today. I've got to show you this, because, Matt, it boggles my mind. Trump and Fox, she writes, are desperately spinning up a fake scandal to distract from his real ones. So it's a day that ends in Y. The more his misdeeds are exposed, the more they lie. For those interested in reality, here's a good debunking of their latest nonsense. And the headline to the story that she's linked to is from Vanity Fair. The headline is, "You'll never believe it, but Hillary Clinton did not, in fact, spy on Trump's White House." Your reaction to that, because what you just said is contradicting what they're saying.
Well, and of course, the Durham indictments support the position that we've taken.
Yeah.
And Vanity Fair is choosing to split hairs over whether or not it was exactly Hillary Clinton or whether or not it was others at the direction of the Clinton campaign and the DNC, which is, of course, what happened. And we remember Donna Brazile saying publicly on television that really there was no distinction between the DNC and the Clinton campaign. So the crimes of the DNC very much imputed onto the conduct of Hillary Clinton. And, here you have a group of people who've spent years now calling us threats to the republic, saying that we're insurrectionists. Well, you know what? We weren't spying on Joe Biden's White House after he entered office. We were trying to make points about election integrity. So I think it's quite rich for those who have very little respect for democracy and the American Republic to now act as though they have this great moral high ground. It is important that we learn what the national security apparatus will do to people if they think that they may lose power. Now, you ripen the very appropriate question, which is, where do we go from here? Now what? Are there going to be consequences, or are we just going to sort of move along? And sadly, because Jeff Sessions was such a bad attorney general, because there was no real effort by Paul Ryan and Trey Gowdy when we had subpoena power to get these things to the forefront earlier, I do suspect that these folks will skate largely. Now, of course, there was the FBI lawyer who changed evidence, a very significant thing. But that person has already had their law license restored. Can you believe that? Rudy Giuliani can't practice law in New York, but yet the FBI lawyer that was changing evidence to try to fool the country into believing some phony Trump-Russia connection, back practicing law. Quite the double standard. But I think that these indictments are important because it will allow us to hopefully reform these entities that were corruptly turned against Trump when they feared that his presidency would be damaging to them.
It is Matt Gaetz, District 1 Republican, the great state of Florida, doing a great job for Americans across the entire country, not just for Florida, but of course doing a great job for your district. Let's delineate between spying on or alleging a Russia collusion connection purposely through technology on a candidate, on a campaign, and on the executive office of the president. Is there a difference? Is there a difference in the law? Is there a difference in the laws broken potentially?
Absolutely. I think that when you have incursions into the White House, into the executive office of the president, and it's for an illicit purpose, that's against a whole lot of really good federal laws. Yeah. It still may be illegal as it relates to the campaign, but certainly illegal, certainly criminal as it relates to the attempted spying on the executive office of the president. And I think that they were doing this spying knowing that there was no real connection between Trump and Russia, but hoping that they could take things out of context to try to weave that together. And Joe Biden does not have clean hands here. Remember, it was the Obama-Biden White House that tried to smear and prosecute and leverage General Flynn over a phone call that General Flynn had with Kislyak, the Russian ambassador, that when you actually looked at it was entirely appropriate. It was Flynn saying, hey, wait a second, hold on, let's not start World War III before our administration has the opportunity to get in, get our feet set, and ensure that we're able to pursue America's interests through sound foreign policy. And you can't help but notice, Joe, that, for all of the talk and bluster about Trump-Russia, you had Putin invade Crimea during the Obama-Biden years, and he may invade Ukraine during the Biden-Harris years. You know how many countries Putin invaded when Trump was president? 0. Let's see if this president can match that record. District
1 Republican, the great state of Florida, Matt Gaetz. Get his book, Firebrand. Go and check out his podcast, Firebrand. It's amazing. I check it out on Rumble every single time. Matt, I've got to ask you, because it's almost as if you're anticipating my questions. We're in sync, my man. Obama, Biden, Comey, Brennan, Clapper, these people all had to know, right? I mean, not only just about the dossier and the fake FISA court warrants and all that stuff, but about Hillary Clinton trying to make this connection through DNS servers and technology between Trump, his home, I guess his campaign office as well, and Russia. They couldn't do that, and then they continued doing it while he was in office. Is it your belief, and this is speculating a bit, and if you don't feel comfortable, don't do it, but is it your belief that they were trying to do everything they could, once they knew they couldn't stop him from being inaugurated, to get rid of him once he was in?
Oh, absolutely. There was absolutely a belief, certainly with Comey and others in the senior leadership of the FBI and the DOJ, that Trump's election wasn't sufficient to legitimize him as president, that they had the opportunity to have the final say by creating these fake investigations and trying to really limit his ability to serve in the role as a global leader, as the leader of the free world in a lot of ways. And we have to think about Comey as the inside man that they left behind. A lot of these folks from the Obama-Biden administration were on the way out, but Comey was the guy that they thought could stay there, could push these lies, could maintain these investigations. And then when Trump fired Comey, which was the right thing to do, well, that's when you had Rosenstein there to get Mueller in position to continue this charade for, years. And in a way, the charade kind of never ended because they never really accepted the victory of Donald Trump. I also think we have to look at the role of Jake Sullivan. Folks are seeing him on TV a lot right now as a sort of a threat constructionist around what's going on in Europe. But remember, Jake Sullivan was like the OG Trump-Russia truther. He was one of the people as the architects of this fraudulent and illegal scheme. And so it's kind of odd to expect anyone in our government or our country to trust the man who literally tried to sell us on the theory that Donald Trump was a Russian agent.
All you have to do is go on YouTube or anywhere else and look up Jake Sullivan. You'll see him on television constantly lying about what he must have known as part of the campaign was made up by the campaign. Now he's the national security advisor, for God's sakes. Matt, should you guys get the House back? Can you do something about somebody who holds such a high position, knowing that without a doubt he's tainted simply by the lies he was telling on television in 2017?
Jake Sullivan is more exposed as a Trump-Russia truther as a member of the government than the people who've left government service. Remember, we have a different ability to compel appearances and compel production of documents from people who are still in government. It becomes a little more difficult after they leave. And so I would suggest that Jake Sullivan would probably be one of the top 5 people that we would want in front of Republican committees doing dogged oversight. And that begs the question about these important midterm elections. Now, I sure wish Durham would have given us this information before the 2020 presidential election, not the 2022 midterms. But now that we're getting this information, I think it should galvanize Republicans around the vision that Marjorie Taylor Greene and I have laid out, that Republican control should be oversight first. We shouldn't start by saying, well, where can we work with the Biden administration and help them pass budgets and spending bills? No, no, no. The first thing we should do is examine these corrupt agencies, and Jake Sullivan is one of the corrupt people we should start with.
It is Matt Gaetz, District 1 Republican, the great state of Florida. Make sure you get his book, Firebrand. Check out the video podcast as well, which is amazing. I really like how you're doing it, Matt. I've got to ask you, why did it take Durham so long, and are we in fear of bypassing the statute of limitations on this? So I think Jim Jordan was asked that question the other day. It wasn't clear. Now that he's made the allegations, has he come in under the statute of limitations?
I do believe now that for those matters that have been indicted and pled, we don't have a concern about statute of limitations, but there are a lot of federal crimes that have a 5-year statute of limitations. And so we are concerned about that. And, I don't want to give people false hope that this somehow means that we're weeks away from seeing Hillary Clinton in shackles. Yeah. I largely believe that the lack of action from the Department of Justice during the Jeff Sessions years probably was dispositive on that question. Now the bigger issue is, what do we do with these highly political organizations like the FBI and the DOJ to ensure that they don't just become the enforcement wing of the Democratic Party? And since they've been caught in these chain of lies and in the distribution of those lies through authorized DOJ leaks, their hands are not clean. And I think it erodes the trust that we can have in them to be nonpartisan in the administration of their ongoing duties. So this is really more about looking forward into reforms than looking backward for criminal prosecutions. Yeah. And that's because we were not quick enough when Jeff Sessions was Attorney General. I was prodding him along. I was begging for special counsels to review just this conduct that now we're seeing from Durham years later. And, you have to wonder, Joe, would this 2020 election turned out different if more of the country would have seen that the claims we were making about the corruption in the Democratic Party were accurate?
Not really even rhetorical, Matt, to be honest with you. Of course it would have turned out differently. We know that 10% who voted for Biden said they would not have voted for Biden had they even known about Hunter Biden's hard drive. So, I mean, we know that. Going forward, though, and I agree with you on Jeff Sessions, he never should have recused himself. That was ridiculous because he said vote for Trump. He's got to recuse himself. That's stupid. But at the end of the day, if Hillary's head isn't going to roll, and it probably won't because she seems to be Teflon, you also are fighting against big tech, big media, Hollywood. All the late night talk shows are making fun of these allegations like they're made up by Fox News or made up by Matt Gaetz. So how do you combat that? Do you have to, or just keep on putting out the truth and people will get it?
You know why they have to use all of those powerful forces to try to stop us? Because there are more of us than there are of them. Yeah. There are more actual Americans who want to observe the evidence and make their own judgments and not have the truth curated for them by big corporations or the media or big tech. And this lays bare a scheme that existed to try to frame Donald Trump for collusion with Russia. When I go back to my original line in this interview, they accuse us of the stuff that they are doing. Yeah. They accuse Trump of harming our institutions, and they literally weaponized those very institutions against our American democracy, against our duly elected president. So there's still a lot of swamp left to drain in Washington, D.C., but I remain hopeful because as we chip away at the corruption, it is just laid bare before the American people.
Matt, you made it very easy to understand. You made it very clear, and I appreciate you coming on to do that. Go and check out Firebrand the book, Firebrand the podcast, and anything Matt Gaetz does, make sure you go and check out as well. Matt, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on and being so clear about exactly what we face right now. Thanks, man.
Thanks so much, Joe.
All right, we're back after this. Stay right here.